Let there be no doubt that I'm a student here today also, okay? Let me start by extending my appreciation to Howard for the invite to be here today. I'll thank you also to Garrett. Howard mentioned that my wife Becky and I made the trek from Chadron, Nebraska. And yes, that's about 9 hours northwest of here. I should actually put Becky's name on this first slide also. My wife Becky's sitting back here beside Sig. We're actually killing two birds with one stone on this trip. The good Lord has blessed us with six children, 5 daughters and 1 son. Our 2 older daughters are both married and raising our grandchildren in the Manhattan, Kansas area. So we delayed our Christmas visitation with them to be able to include this trip also. But Howard, thank you very, very much for the invitation. Okay, I should actually put Becky's name on this slide also because we both wear both of these hats. Okay, we both work for Chadron State College, obviously located in the small town of Chadron, Nebraska. Anybody ever been there? Okay, it's in the beautiful Pine Ridge area of the extreme northwest Nebraska, the northwest panhandle, if you will. We're about 20 minutes from South Dakota, about an hour from Wyoming. Okay, not a large campus, about 2,800 students. Becky works in the admissions program or the enrollment management program. A big part of her job is to try to increase student numbers, obviously, because that's why we're there, right? And I'm happy to say that Chadron State College enrollment has increased here in recent years. I teach the range livestock production courses within the rangeland management program at Chadron State. Okay, rangeland management at Chadron State is slowly growing also. In fact, we now rank second nationwide in terms of undergraduate student enrollment with about 140 students in the program. We are eclipsed only by Texas A&M. Of course, everything is bigger in Texas, you know, but my point is with about 140 undergraduate students in the program, we've now eclipsed the other notable range management programs like University of Wyoming, Colorado State, Utah State, New Mexico State. So we're happy with our slow growth. Okay. Within rangeland management, there's about 5 options. One of those is called range livestock production, and those are the courses that I teach. Okay. Now, for a college student that wanted an animal science degree in Kansas, they'd likely go to Kansas State and be part of the animal science program. In Nebraska, they'd probably go to UNL and be part of the animal science program there. My point is, we don't offer an animal science degree at Chadron State College. We offer a rangeland management program, but they have an option in range livestock production. Okay. Those of you that have traveled in that part of the world, you know that is range country. Okay, it's range country. Not a lot of farm ground. Okay. Oh, there's some irrigated districts there, like the south of Hay Springs that has a large irrigation district that was established after World War II. But beyond that, there's not much farming going on. Quite a bit of hay production because most of it's commercial cow-calf production. Okay? Let's move on here. Please interrupt me anytime you might have a question. Let's spend a little bit of time here. The second point on that slide there, Bolze Ranch Angus. Since 1978, let's see, do the math, I think we're in our 44th or 45th year. Becky and I have bred on a registered Angus cow herd. We treat them like commercial cows. We make them work for a living, so they're really commercial cows with papers. Okay? very non-traditional in our production model. We're not focused on maximum growth, maximum milk, maximum carcass, like so much of the seed stock industry. We're focused on, well, in fact, our tagline is lower input maternal function. We want a beef cow that, given the opportunity, can graze 365 days a year, admittedly with some strategic protein supplementation, just to keep the rumen functional, but a much, much smaller cow than what the industry is chasing today. Our cows only weigh about 1150, okay? Very non-traditional in our calving season. We don't calve until late April and May, okay? Keep the top half of the male calf crop. Make them winter graze their first winter, summer graze their second summer, and then offer a 16 to 18-month-old forage developed bull in the fall, okay? That's never had any grain, okay? Just grazing and maybe some hay supplementation and some protein, okay? Don't use modern-day genetics. Use genetics from the late 70s, early 80s. Well, the young lady there is our youngest daughter. Her name's Sadie. She's she's got 5 siblings. That's her friend Tanner. Finally, the youngest one came along and showed some interest in the cow herd. And we're just so blessed that she's continuing the dream, if you will. She keeps an old nucleus of old granny cows. She's got a handful of 15, 16-year-old cows. She'll AI those to old bulls from the 70s and 80s, okay? And we hope to get sons out of those old cows. Those are her herd bulls. Point is, that's how she spreads those old mother cows across future generations of replacement females through their sons. But their sons are sired by bulls with a proven track record of having produced daughters that excelled in lower input systems, okay? Now, you didn't come here to hear about Bolze Ranch Angus production model, but you need to understand that those are the 2 hats that Becky and I wear. Chadron State College and Bolze Ranch Angus, okay? Now let's get to the assigned topic. I'm going to talk about generational transition today, or succession planning, if you will, okay? I think it really begs the question, who's going to be managing our farms and ranches moving forward, okay? I am delighted to see everybody here. In fact, I thank you for being here. That tells me that you've got a conservation mindset, okay? And what Howard and Sig have shared with me about the Cheney Lake Conservation Project, wow. This is unique. I didn't know this existed. You actually are in a position to provide the financial incentive for farmers to do some of the right things to protect water quality for those folks that are downstream. And I applaud you for those efforts. But if you've been exposed to the same statistics I've been exposed to, you know that today's average age of farmers and ranchers is creeping up there. We're well into our 60s. Okay, some of us are already there. Okay, and as I look around the room, my best assessment is that some of you are already there also. And hopefully you've got the next generation, or someone, doesn't have to be your immediate children, lined up to take over the reins. Okay, so it begs the question, who's going to be managing our farms and ranches as time moves on? I think most of us would agree that we would prefer to see these farms and ranches in the hands of private family ownership. Okay? Not corporate America. Sorry. I'm guessing maybe that we have a few in here that work for corporate America. Okay? But I think long term that the health of American agriculture, or agriculture anywhere in the world, lies in the hands of private family ownership. Okay, and again, it doesn't have to be immediate family members. I meant to make a comment before I started here. I'm not a farmer. Okay, I've spent my entire career both in the academic community and also in production agriculture in the ranching or the cow-calf industry. I didn't share, and I will now, I grew up in south central Pennsylvania on a dairy farm, just like Howard back there, about 60 cows. Penn State undergrad, but when I was in school at Penn State, I lived at the beef bar, and that's where I got a passion for beef cattle. But when I came home, kind of split the family. One family stayed with the dairy. The other side of the family got into beef production. My father and I were the largest cattle finishers in Pennsylvania for 5 or 6 years. We would buy heavy yearlings out of the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, haul them north to south central Pennsylvania, and put the last 400 or 500 pounds on them. Every Monday morning, I was hauling a straight rig to local auction barns with fed cattle. But along comes the late 70s. Some of you can remember the late 70s, can't you? What were interest rates? 16, 17, 18%. Okay, my parents were borrowing money to buy feeder cattle. Fortunately, they saw the wisdom in quitting doing that. Okay? So now the farm's still in the family. But the point is that kind of forced me to rethink my career opportunities. So my point is that's the closest I ever came to farming, was growing corn for corn silage and high moisture ground ear corn and alfalfa to finish cattle. Okay? All right, so understand I'm not a farmer. Who's going to manage these farms and ranches? Okay, I think it begs the question, what's the most important crop can we plant? Okay, as Becky and I traveled down here from Manhattan yesterday, obviously this is, I assume, corn bean country. Yeah, I had to look at this field just south down here, and it dawned on me that's actually cotton production. I didn't realize that was that far south, or that you grew a little bit of cotton in this part of the world. But what's the most important plant we can, or crop we can plant? I think it's that one. We got to figure out how to keep young people on these farms and ranches. We've got to figure out how to get that done. Okay? We've got to make room for the next generation. And that brings me to what Howard really challenged me to talk about, and that's generational transition. Call it what you like, succession planning. It's really more than just estate planning, because we're talking more than just passing on the business model. Up until about 2 or 3 months ago, I worked with another outfit part-time called the Nebraska Grazing Lands Coalition. You have a similar organization here in Kansas called the Kansas Grazing Lands Coalition. One of the projects we've been involved with in recent years has been generational transition. Okay, about almost 5 years ago, we sought some grant funding. We hired a part-time coordinator, if you will, of our generational transition efforts. And that person put on, I think, 6 to 8 workshops across the state of Nebraska every year. And then, of course, COVID reared its ugly head, and so we took about an 18-month hiatus. But now we're back, or this organization is back doing that again. We put on generational transition workshops. We utilized an estate planning attorney by the name of Pamela Olson. Okay. She is very, very good at what she does. She's actually located in the southwest corner of the Nebraska Panhandle, north of Kimball, Nebraska. I think her address would be Harrisburg, Nebraska. She actually married into the Olson-Hereford ranch operation. But very, very good about what she does. She ramrods these generational transition sessions. She brings all the legal ease, if you will, the understanding of current state and federal tax law implications. I mean, let's face it. One of the significant hurdles to the next generation taking over the farm or the ranch is federal inheritance tax obligations. Okay? Unfortunately, in some cases, that next generation has to sell the farmer the ranch to fulfill the federal inheritance tax obligations. But with proper, adequate estate planning, oftentimes those things can be avoided or at least greatly diminished. Okay, and that's primarily what Pam Olson has brought to these estate planning or these generational transition workshops. She's been invited to share the message, if you will, at the National Grazing Conference and also at the Grass-Fed Exchange here last May. So, tremendous resource. Now, obviously, you should have access to more local legal expertise. I'm guessing that some of you have already jumped through these hoops and feel very, very comfortable about where you're sitting on your generational transition plan and your estate planning. And if you have, I applaud you for that. Okay. At these workshops, we also have used rancher panels. Okay. Ranchers that have already been through the generational transition process. Okay. Some that are in the midst of the process, that are willing to get up and share their story with their peers or with other ranchers, okay? In a few cases, we have actually had ranchers in tears sharing their story about how their process didn't work as best as they would have hoped, okay? Because of family issues, okay? Or the fact that they didn't have adequate estate planning in place to avoid some of the federal inheritance tax implications. But the ranchers tell a very, very sincere, from the heart story. So that's how these generational workshops have been structured. Combination of Pamela Olson or a very, very well-trained, knowledgeable estate planning attorney and these rancher panel workshops, or these rancher panels. Again, 6 to 8 of these a year across the state of Nebraska. Is there anything like that going on in Kansas? Okay. UNL, for example, is heavily involved with these kinds of workshops. I'm guessing that K-State might be also, or maybe some other entities. Okay. If you haven't taken part in those, I'd highly encourage you to do so. Okay. Highly encourage you to do so. Communication. Wow, this is not easy. You know, looking back to the late 70s, farming with my father, as much as I so dearly loved him, and I look back on my experience at time with great fondness, okay, there were times when we just did not get along, okay? We just saw things differently. Communication is not always easy, especially with family farming and ranching situations. Oftentimes, the more senior generation doesn't want to talk about generational transition. Okay, they view it as the younger generation just want to get them out of the way. Okay, but we have to initiate these conversations. More than just in passing. I would highly encourage that if you haven't initiated this process, designate time wherein the entire family can sit down and welcome every family member to come together and have an opportunity to voice their vision for the future. Provide an opportunity for mom and dad to actually express to all the children what their vision and hopes and dreams are for the future. In some cases, it may require hiring an outside facilitator to help the family sit down and initiate discussion about generational transition. Okay? Communication is not easy. Another major point about generational transition. Equal is not equitable. This is one of the primary take-home messages I learned from Pamela Olson. Equal is not equitable. Let's say, for example, that a ranch husband and wife have 5 children. Okay? And they feel the need to treat all their children equally, okay? In many cases, the value of that ranch or farm estate is split equally across all the children, okay? Now let's think about it. Oftentimes it's been one of the 5 children that stayed there for 20 or 30 years and helped build the business, okay? Now, if that estate is split equally 5 ways, the child that stayed there probably has to buy out the siblings. And in many cases can't afford to do that, okay? And hence the entire operation has to be sold to settle the estate. You know, there are very imaginative methods out there that would involve life insurance, for example, okay, to help cover the children that opted not to stay and spend their working years helping to build the business. And again, I'm not an attorney. Again, those are kinds of questions for an estate planning attorney. But there are methods out there that can be utilized to be very, very fair to those children that opted not to stay on the farm or ranch, and still place the children that did stay there in an equitable, an enviable position to be able to hang on to the farm or ranch. So the take-home message is equal is not equitable. Okay, we need to take, in my opinion, take care of that next generation that actually stayed there and helped build the business. With my incoming freshmen and the classes that I teach at Chadron State, I ask them, in fact, the first day of class, I have them stand up, share their name, where they came from, okay, and what their passion is in life as an 18-year-old. You imagine? I mean, think about it, okay? They're not allowed to say their boyfriend or their girlfriend, okay? What's your passion in life? A lot of them have probably never thought about it. They don't have one, okay? A few do, okay? But I encourage them heavily, not just that day, but in the next 4 years. In fact, I ask them frequently, what's your passion in life? Okay, what is your passion in life? And what are you going to do? What are you going to devote every day to pursue that passion? Okay? What are you going to do to pursue that passion? Now, in my case, pick a big number, 80% of my students come from ranches, okay? They come with a fair amount of respect and, in many cases, adequate work ethic, okay? Now, don't get me wrong, those characteristics can be found in non-ranch kids too, but I am blessed in that regard. Many of them do have a passion to return to the farm or the ranch, okay? And then it becomes a question of, well, how are you going to get there? Okay? What are you going to take home that might be different than what you left? Okay? All right, so find a passion in life. If you don't have one, find one. I don't care what it is. It may not even be agricultural. But find a passion in life and devote yourself to it. One of, obviously, the most important points about being able to pass the operation on to the next generation is who the next generation chooses to marry. Okay, I don't think we think about that sometimes, okay? But if a husband, assuming you still believe in the institution of marriage, if a husband and wife can truly have the same passion about the farm or ranch, that's going to keep it alive. That's going to keep it alive 30, 40, 50 years from now, when through the thick and the thin. Okay? If that husband and wife can be on the same passion, in the same page, with the same passion about that farm or that ranch, they'll still be digging every day for the same objectives. Okay, I sometimes think that the happiest people I've ever been around, the happiest couples, are those couples that never quite achieved their dreams. They never quite got there. Okay? Now, yes, their dreams are going to change through the years, but the point is they still have that jointly shared passion about getting there every day. Okay? So who we marry is a critical. In fact, my wife has summed it up, I thought, very eloquently. Marriage isn't about a beautiful wedding, fancy homes, cute kids, nice cars, and white picket fences. Marriage is working long hours, fighting through struggles, looking good in thrift shop clothes, worrying about cows and finances, setting up life insurance, traveling for work, planning for future retirement, paying bills, hospital stays, keeping the faith, and staying together through it all. So thank you, Becky, for numerous years of through it all. Okay? Marrying the right person. Very, very critical to successful generational transition. All right, now, this is going to be a review for some of you. I've already told you I'm not an estate planning attorney, so I don't have the details on how you can be more successful about your plan. Hopefully, many of you jumped through that plan already. To me, being successful at generational transition, particularly for that next generation, is maybe having a different mindset about what agriculture can and should be. These next few slides are going to be a review for you because you've already been exposed to some, in my opinion, elite thinkers about what the future of ag can and should be. Now we're going to shift to generational transition, okay? And Howard and others that work with him have had the foresight to bring these kinds of people to you already. Okay? Guys like Ray Archuleta, the soil guy, right? How many have been exposed to that guy? Don't you wish we could bottle that enthusiasm? Ray's one of my heroes. Okay? Surround yourself with positive thinking people. Become a lifelong learner, okay? Education doesn't stop after you get out of high school or college. Shoot, it's a lifelong process. That happens to be a book we use in a farm ranch management class that was written by Dave Pratt, the guy that up until about 2 years ago owned Ranching for Profit. Anybody ever been through Ranching for Profit? Okay. Excellent resource, okay? Here's a book that we use in farm ranch management. It's called For the Love of Land. That was written by Jim Howe from Ranchland, LLC. Okay. I asked my students if they like to read, and not very many of them do. But at the end of 4 years, they have. Okay. Just become an avid reader. Okay. Seek a mentor. Seek a mentor. There are people out there with a wealth of experience that would be passionate about passing that on. Here's two guys here. The guy on your left is Jim Choquette. Anybody know Jim Choquette? Okay, from Upland, Nebraska, south of Kearney. Jim's getting up in years now. He's well into his 80s, but for 30-some years, he moved cows once a day. Can you believe that? For 30-some years, he moved cows every day. Unless those few days when he was traveling to see family or attend some other event, okay? It is amazing what he's done to that grass. It's amazing what he's done to his grass, okay? He's such a mentor to young people. The guy on the right here, the little guy in the front, Lynn Myers. Anybody ever run cross paths with Lynn Myers from the Myers-Tibbet Ranch, about 23 miles south of Ashby, Nebraska, in the heart of the Sandhills? 30-some years ago, Lynn was the first guy to set up a 3-year deferred rotation on Sandhills grass. Okay? 30-some years ago. It's amazing what he can grow, or what he did grow there. Unfortunately, Lynn's now deceased, but such a mentor. He created what was called the Cowboy Logic Stewardship Network within the Nebraska Grazing Lands Coalition, served on that board until the day of his death. But just such a mentor, just welcoming young people and teaching them the finer nuances of grazing management. So the mentors are out there. Cole, can you find yourself in that picture? Okay. Cole devoted the time and effort and expense to attend a 3.5 day youth ranching for profit school that we held at the Niobrara Preserve, north of Johnstown, Nebraska, this past summer. Ranching for profit is typically designed more for adults, or older adults, I should say. But the Nebraska Grazing Lands put together a 3.5 day session where we invited John Locke in Texas and took us through a 3.5 day session. These 30 or so students that showed up for this had the drive and the passion like I have never seen in a group of young people. I came away from this event refreshed with confidence that we had that next generation that was the correct mindset moving forward. A group of young people that really wanted to learn and go home equipped with different thought process. I encourage my students to pursue internships every summer that they're in school, in college. Now, very few do, partly because mom and dad like to have them at home helping with labor situation, okay? But not just summer internships during the college years. Even after graduation, I'd tell them that they'd be a whole lot better served if they went and worked for somebody else for 3 or 4 years. Okay, mom and dad don't like to hear that sometimes, particularly if the plan is for that student to eventually come home and take over the ranch. But they would be so blessed if they would go and work for somebody else for 3 or 4 years. We call them internships while they're still in college, but after graduation, let's call them life's experiences. Go work for somebody for 4 to 6 months and spend 3 or 4 years working for different people. Make your mistakes on somebody else's dime before you go home, okay? So life's experiences are internships. All right. Think for the next generation that really wants to make a living with production agriculture. I think we need to be serious about who our customer is. Who's your customer? Okay, who is your customer? Okay, more specifically, and again, I'm not a farmer, so please don't be offended by this thought process, okay? You want to sell a commodity? Okay? I mean, you've heard this before. Historically, the value of commodities long term is pretty close to the cost of production. Okay? Until the government gets involved. But we're not going to go down that path, okay? My question is, do you want to sell a commodity? Or do you want to sell something directly to consumers? Okay. Now, to sell directly to consumers, it may require a total shift in what you produce. Okay. But it does beg the question, who makes the most money with an agricultural product? Who makes the most money with an agricultural product? I'm sorry? The retailer. The person that touches it last before the consumer, right? The person that touches it last before the consumer. So I think there's huge opportunity for direct-to-consumer sales. Is it for everybody? No. Does it take a special skill set? Yes. Okay. Now, I'll use our daughter as an example. All of our misfits, okay? You know, we expect our yearling heifers to breed in 30 days and our running age cows to breed in 45 days, so we get a fair number of opens, okay? The open heifers will keep through their second winter, graze them the third summer. They become a 1,200-pound, truly grass-fed heifer. It all goes direct to consumers. All the open cows get ground and sold as grass-fed hamburger direct to consumers. Okay. She's been at this 5 or 6 years. When she first started, of the 10 entities that she approached about buying a product, she got 9 nays and 1 yay. Okay, got to be willing to face rejection. Okay, you got to be willing to face rejection. Okay, but there are opportunities out there for direct-to-consumer sales, not just for beef products, for most ag products. Here's a really good friend of mine, Luke Jacobson, out of Marquette, Nebraska, just northeast of Grand Island. About 100 head cow herd. His entire production goes to direct-to-consumer sales. His entire production as a grass-finished product. Now, he's fortunate to have 3 daughters that live in Omaha. So from mid-April to mid-October, when the Omaha farmers markets are active, on Friday nights he hauls a cooler trailer filled with product to the west side of Omaha. The next day they're set up at 3 sites. But think about the entire production from 100 head cow herd that goes direct to consumers and the increased value that has brought their way. Okay, technological applications. Here now I probably am treading on thin ice, and please forgive me because I'm not a farmer, okay? These are my perceptions. Precision agriculture is a wonderful thing, as exemplified on your left there. Precision agriculture is a wonderful thing. Okay, we now have what? Variable rate seeding, variable rate fertilizer application. We can be far more precise about herbicide application. Okay, maybe variable rate irrigation in time and other precision ag applications that I'm not even aware of. It's a wonderful thing. Okay. But it's geared towards chemical farming, isn't it? Not biological farming. It's geared towards chemical farming. Okay? Now let's take on the right-hand side here. Where's the technological application in that picture? Modern day low impedance electric fencing enables us to create grazing pressure, if you will, to apply the principles of a holistic planned grazing management principles of high stock density, short duration, long recovery. And the only technology is modern day electric fencing. Okay? But that's biological farming on the right. That's biological farming. Now we're enhancing soil health principles. Okay? I'm not picking on John Deere dealerships here. Please don't take it that way. And not equipment manufacturers in general. I just think for the next generation, we probably need to be really, really careful about investments in depreciable assets. Think about the amount of debt that many modern day farmers take on and ranchers. Okay. Think of the dollars that flow through our fingers pursuing an opportunity to make so little. Think of the dollars that flow through our fingers in terms of investments, gross income, to make so few dollars at the end of the day. Okay? So, depreciable assets, I think, can be a concern. Let's focus our attention on resource prioritization. And again, you've been exposed to these guys numerous times. You've been exposed to the soil health principles. Okay, I didn't always think this way. You know, I've spent most of my career in the cattle industry, and I dearly love beef cattle. In fact, my mother told me one time, Ronnie, cattle will probably be your demise. And I'm not so sure she's not still right. Okay, but today, if you ask the average rancher what they do, and they'll say they produce cattle. A few years ago, maybe some of us focused our attention and came away with the mindset that, well, maybe we raise grass. And we use cattle to harvest that grass. Now, I think some of us have shifted to the point where soil is number one. Grass is number two. And cattle is number three. Or at least in my mind, that's the proper thought process. I think the year was 2012. Anybody remember when this YouTube video went viral? Anybody remember having watched this? Alan Savory on greening the world's deserts and reversing climate change. For me, that was one of the aha moments, if you will, in my path. Let's turn the clock back. 200 years, maybe 250, okay? What surrounded Hutchinson, Kansas? Prairie grass, tall grass prairie, okay? The tall grass prairie, okay? With deep, deep soils, okay? Which brings us to the carbon discussion, doesn't it? Okay, then you've been exposed to this, okay? If we were to have taken a soil sample 200, 250 years ago, and if Ward Labs, for example, or whatever soil testing lab you would utilize, if they existed at that time and you sent a soil sample, what kind of organic matter would the test results show 250 years ago? What kind of organic matter in the soils 250 years ago? Anybody have any idea?
7 or 8%.
Correct. 7 or 8% on tall grass prairie soils. Absolutely. Okay. Now, obviously, for a variety of reasons, we don't grow tall grass prairie in this part of the world, or across a lot of what used to be tall grass prairie. If we were to take soil samples today, what would those organic matters be? Between 1 and 2. Okay. Now, soil organic matter, as you've learned from Ray Archuleta, is about 50% carbon, isn't it? It's about 50% carbon. Where did the carbon go? It went into the atmosphere. Okay. Now, farmers and ranchers don't think about it that way, or maybe don't like to think about it that way. Okay. When we think about, and you can make your own thought process on climate change. I'm not here to discuss that. But I think it's irrefutable that with in excess of 400 parts per million carbon in our atmosphere now, that it came from somewhere. Most of us, or most of the consuming public, thinks that it came from burning fossil fuels, and some of it did. But a large chunk of the carbon in our atmosphere today came from the soil. Okay? The great news is we can put it back. We can put it back through alternatives in farming practices and grazing management. We can put carbon back in the soil. And in Alan Savory's thought process, we return our soil carbon contents to pre-industrial era. Return it to 7 to 8% or higher soil carbon. Okay? Okay. All right, so you've been exposed to the Gabe Browns, the Ray Archuletas, the David Brandts, the Shane News, the Alan Williams of the world. Those guys are my heroes. Let's review the Gabe Brown story very, very briefly. Okay? The Gabe Brown story. 30-some years ago, when he married into his wife's operation, okay, at that time it was pretty much row crop production, east of Bismarck, North Dakota, okay? Mostly small grains, oats, barley, wheat, okay? Tilled soils, soil organic matters less than 2%, okay? 3 successive years of total crop failure. I think he had 2 major hailstorms and 1 severe year of drought. Point is, adversity forced Gabe to think different. He had to do something different. He and his wife had borrowed operating money to put those crops out. Now they didn't harvest anything. The point is now the farm and the ranch were used as collateral to borrow that money. Okay, so he got away from soil tillage. Started to no-till. Well, shoot, that was no big deal. No-till farming had been around for 40, 50 years, probably 20 years before he started farming. Okay, but then he started growing cover crops. At first, monocultures of cover crops, like rye, for example. But you've been exposed to Gabe. You now know that he uses diverse mixes of cover crops. In fact, I think he takes about 1/5 to 1/4 of his row crop acres and takes them out of commodity production for that full year just to grow the soil primers, to create the armor on the soil to build soil carbon. Okay? All right. Today, Gabe's crop yields are 30% above his neighbors' averages, the county averages, with no commercial fertilizer, no insecticides, no fungicides, minimal herbicide. He'll occasionally have a little bit of weeds that get out of hand. He might have to have a herbicide burn down, but 30% increase in crop yields with hardly any inputs. Okay? Now, Gabe will tell you that he didn't do that cold turkey. He would advise about, totally cutting off all inputs. But then it's taken him 30-some years to now rebuild his soils to, in some cases, 10 to 12% organic matter. You've been exposed to the soil health principles, keeping the soil covered at all times, no bare soil. And of course, he makes those soil covers by mob grazing. He mob grazes with electric fence. Forces the cattle to eat about 1/3 and trample the other 2/3. Most farmers, ranchers would view that as waste. He's really creating the soil armor that he plants the next commodity crop into. And this is how he gets away from using herbicides, where the weeds don't come up through the armor. Minimal soil disturbance, no-till systems. Growing root at all times. A growing root at all times. A growing root, as you know, gives off root exudates that attract and feed the microbes. The microbes then bring the soil nutrients to the plant. My point is, it's a two-way interchange. The soil feeds the microbes. The plants feed the microbes. The microbes help feed the plant. It's not just the soil supporting the plants. It's a two-way interchange. So having that growing root at all times. Tremendous plant diversity, both warm and cool season grasses and broadleaves in the same field at the same time. No monocultures. Okay, and here's the part that's probably the most difficult for most farmers. A lot of farmers that are into the soil health principles have bought into those first 4 principles. Here's the one that's most difficult, because they don't have livestock. They've long since torn out all the fences, okay? And I'm here to say that they don't have to own livestock. There are numerous young people out there that would love to have an opportunity to graze, but they don't own land. Why not form some of these relationships wherein the people that do own the cattle can provide these benefits, these soil health principles, to farmers that don't own cattle? And again, electric fencing makes a lot of that possible. Water infiltration with soil cover and increased soil organic matters. So it's really not how much water we get, it's really how much we keep. All right. I'm going to conclude with this thought here. There's nothing more powerful than a humble person with a warrior spirit who's driven by a bigger purpose. I'd like to think that this really describes a lot of our young people that just can't hardly wait to become involved with production agriculture. And if we can just figure out the generational transition process to provide these opportunities for the next generation, boy, we'd have a win-win deal, okay? Do you need to explain that picture? That's our youngest daughter. I need to confess, we don't own a place, so I'm probably not the guy to talk about generational transition to begin with, okay? Our daughter functions off of long-term lease arrangements, okay? This is Nebraska. Well, Nebraska has a series of, the Game and Parks has a number of wildlife management areas across Nebraska. This one's called the Ponderosa. It's south of Crawford, Nebraska. It's about 2,700 acres contiguous. 2016 wildfire took out all the fences, and they've never been rebuilt. So twice a week she builds 60 to 70 acre paddocks with solar powered polywire and step-in posts and moves cow herd twice a week. That's the easy part. The other part is there's no water. She has to haul water for about 5 months a year, okay? But the reason I put this picture in here, this picture is taken the first week of September, okay? First week of September. What do you see in the picture? A lot of grass, tall grass, right? Well, in that part of the world, we would call it sand blue stem. This part of the world, you'd call it big blue stem, okay? They're very, very similar, okay? The first week of June, 90 days previous, is when she first grazed this. She either grazed it or trampled it. High stock density, short duration, okay? 90 days later, it looks like this. That wasn't there 90 days previous, okay? My point is the disturbance, the impact can create the opportunity for those plants to express themselves. She didn't come back and regraze that for 18 months. High stock density, short duration, long recovery, okay? I think that might be my last slide. Okay. So again, who will be farming or ranching in the future? You will be. Okay. You young folks in the crowd, you're going to be doing that. Okay. With the assistance of your parents. Or again, maybe doesn't have to be immediate family members. Okay. But with a change in mindset and maybe a focus on a different type of agriculture that's regenerative, I think the future looks really, really bright. Really bright. Okay. I think that's my last slide.